Enchanté.
Well, hello. Welcome back to Globethotter, the pod that puts the lover in travel lover. I'm your host, Cassy Martinez, and welcome back to another Globethotter Quickie. Quickies are short and sweet episodes featuring just yours truly. Sandwiched between longer episodes that feature guests, these are quick and dirty minis where I'll be talking directly to you. Quickies are a space for me to share wild travel stories, spout out some wisdom, and answer some of your burning listener questions. And well, today, you guys, things are getting personal. I'm going to be sharing a story about a time that I globethotted just a little too close to the sun and unintentionally ended up breaking someone's heart. So buckle up, because this story gets a little bumpy. So, as some of you may know, I recently held an absolutely amazing group trip to Sayulita, Mexico back in February to celebrate Galentine's with a group of amazing gals from all over the world. But what you might not know is I met someone before the trip even kicked off. Let's spill the tea, shall we? Okay, so as I normally do before any group trip I host, I headed to the trip's destination a few days in advance to settle in and confirm some reservations. Cross the T's, dot the I's. There was nothing else really on the docket for me to do over those 2 days before the trip kicked off, other than refamiliarize myself with Sayulita after a year away. So I figured, why not squeeze in a surf trip to really land in Sayulita? A hobby I picked up while volunteering this past fall in Playa Venao in Panama, a tucked-away beach town with less than 300 people living in it. I have become obsessed with surfing. So obsessed that I actually asked my mom to get me this amazing cheetah surf suit as my Christmas gift this past year, which I totally packed to rock in Mexico. To give you guys a visual, the surf suit zips up the front, letting you put the girlies on display, and hugs you in all the right places. And did I mention it's cheetah print? God, I love being extra. Anyway, after throwing it on and giving myself a pep talk in the mirror, I walked over to Marea Surf School, where everyone was standing outside and dressed up in everyday beach clothes. I'm talking shorts, tees, bikini tops. In short, no one was wearing anything like me. Great. I could feel my body temperature rise up in front of the group's collective gaze. I felt a bit like Elle Woods in that hilarious scene in Legally Blonde where she shows up to the party in the sexy bunny outfit. Yeah, you know the vibes. Well, WWEWD, right? AKA, what would Elle Woods do? She'd shrug it off, remember she looks amazing, and say hi to a stranger. Which is exactly what I did next. Enter Daniel, whose name is not actually really Daniel, but for the sake of his privacy, is today. Daniel was on the last day of a solo getaway from his hometown of Guadalajara, Mexico, which is about 4 or 5 hours from Sayulita by motorcycle. Daniel's preferred method of transportation. Swoon. I recognized the hostel wristband he was wearing and asked him about it to start the conversation. Pro tip, y'all, you don't gotta go too deep when you say hello. A simple leading question like where are you from or how are you liking your hostel works just fine. The right person will be stoked to talk to you about anything. Gauge their energy and move forward from there. We ended up making small talk before splitting into 2 different surf groups, and that was that. I had booked a private lesson, so I didn't engage with Daniel too much during our big surf trip, but I know he saw me ripping it out in the water. Just kidding. When the lesson was over, we all hung out on the sand, recharging. Daniel hung back from the larger group convo on his own, and, well, I reminded myself that it was his last day in town, and who cares anyway? So I boldly went over to break the ice. After a few minutes of conversation, we ended up separating back into 2 groups again and riding back into town. My group took the scenic view back and arrived a bit later than his, but when I hopped off the van, I was surprised to see him still hanging around the surf house, phone in hand, waiting to get my Instagram. After we swapped IGs, I boldly asked if he wanted to get dinner that night. Noticing a theme here? Travel Cassy is bold as hell and has no qualms asking for what she wants. We agreed to some loose plans and went our separate ways, and later that night met up in the town's bustling plaza and walked the cobblestone streets in search of Italian. One thing I remember about that night is it just felt so easy. Conversation was light, it was fun, and we were both feeling that post-surf euphoria. It wasn't until I passed a fuzzy mirror on the street that I noticed something slightly off with my reflection. I leaned in closer, but the mirror was covered in dust, so I excused myself to a nearby restaurant bathroom to check it out. And yep, sure enough, I had bird shit in my hair. I think it had landed in my hair when I was sitting under a tree waiting for Daniel, but I remember instead of feeling mortified, I simply washed it off. See, as a solo female traveler with 8 years under my belt roaming this planet, I am sadly no stranger to bird shit. Off the top of my head, I can recall at least 2 times a bird has shot on my head. Once under the Eiffel Tower, and another time in a train station in Porto. What I did find interesting about this time, though, was that I felt completely at ease over it. I knew Daniel wouldn't care, and I felt so confident in my skin in that moment that I found I didn't care either. It didn't feel like some Cosmo Mag dating horror story. If anything, it felt like a sign of good luck, which I had one time read that some cultures around the world see bird shit as, FYI. After the bird shitcident, we simply moved on with our night. Following dinner, we walked the streets of Sayulita, both way too tired to enter any of the bustling bars lining the street. And, well, getting tipsy that night wasn't really our vibe anyway. So instead, we walked and talked for hours. At the end of the night, Daniel walked me to my hotel. You could tell he was a bit nervous as he leaned in to give me a hug goodbye. As he was turning on his heel to leave, I boldly, yet again, asked if he wanted to kiss me. His face lit up and he leaned in for a passionate kiss. We kissed for some time in my hotel doorway before I took him up to the hotel rooftop that overlooked the ocean. The moon that night was a paid actor with its glow reflecting beautifully off the water. That night, we kept things pretty PG-13 and he really respected my boundaries. Green flag alert. Over the next few days, we stayed in loose contact. Nothing crazy, really. I was on a group trip with my girlies after all, and we were living it up. It wasn't until the trip wrapped that we really started chatting again, with me dropping the, "Why don't you come back?" And then him hitting me with the, "Well, why don't you come here?" Which prompted me to start looking at Airbnbs in Guadalajara. And when I saw just how reasonable they were, it was on like Donkey Kong. And while we're on the subject of making moves to visit a travel beau, before I press book on any trip, I always ask myself, if things with that person don't end up going exactly like I envision, will I be okay? Or will it cause me to spiral? And I've got to be real with myself. And then I just take it from there. For me, I knew whether or not our second rendezvous would be a hit, I'd still have a great time in Guadalajara. It was a city I'd been wanting to see for a while, and I knew I could always fall back on Airbnb experiences or heck, even Bumble to make my own fun if I ended up alone instead. So, with plan A and plan B in mind, I got on a bus to GDL and headed Daniel's way. So I'm going to spare you the details of our daily adventures together because, after all, this is meant to be a quickie. But let me just say, Daniel showed out for me. Every day was jam-packed and full of exploring. From delicious markets and museums in the city to hopping on his motorcycle for day trips to gems like Tequila and Tlaquepaque, Daniel had created an extensive itinerary that covered my entire time in the city. One thing that was not on the agenda, though, a conversation about where we stand. If I'm being honest, there were multiple moments during our time together that would have been great for having the talk. For bossing up and being real about what that week meant for both of us and what our expectations were. But instead, we leaned into the moment hard. In all fairness, looking back, I didn't feel it was necessary to speak up because I had just assumed that we were on the same page about what we could offer or expect out of each other, which for me was basically just the present moment, with a potential for rekindling our relationship if there was ever alignment in our locations in the future. But you know what they say about assuming. It makes an ass out of you and me. A week after I got back from Mexico and the butterflies had worn off a bit, I could feel our WhatsApp convo had taken on a certain edge. He was quieter, not reciprocating my lovey-dovey emojis as much. which I shrugged off. It happens with time, I thought. But over the coming days, I could feel a bit more tension. I finally just asked what was up. After a bit of back and forth, the truth came out. Daniel had caught real feelings and was left feeling disillusioned once I left. He admitted to knowing that while he didn't have grounds to really be upset because we had never defined things or talked about the future, he was still quite hurt because in the back of his mind, he had always seen a potential future for us, even though he never really said it. And now that I was back home, those dreams felt DOA. Oh, and he had gone through Globetotter's Instagram, which, if you follow, you'd know is full of cheeky humor surrounding travel dating, the apps, and everything in between. So, it's safe to say some more assuming went down. In one particular biting text, Daniel even admitted to feeling like just another notch in my traveler's belt. I was shook, to say the least. I sat with Daniel's message for some time. I could feel his hurt, but at the same time, his assumptions had hurt me. I did my best to craft a response that both honored his feelings and owned my part in how things had transpired, while also defending myself and my truth, which is that I'm proud of this pod, the community that I've built, and the people that I've helped along the way be their most bold and enlivened selves. The truth is, I never shied away from the fact that I hosted a dating podcast or curated trips for solo travelers looking to turn up and find love. If anything, those were some of the things that Daniel liked most about me. As I hit send on my reply, I felt like I had spoken my truth. My message didn't shy away from the fact that I had feelings for him, deeper than I had felt in a long time for somebody, and much more than just the average travel fling, FYI. But I was also refreshingly clear about what I could realistically offer and what I'd expect in return in terms of respect in the future, if we were to have any future at all, that is. Oh yeah, and I also shared that Globethotter wasn't going anywhere, and any potential partner needed to be comfortable with that. Lastly, I mentioned my door was always open to chat things out in real time versus after assumptions had already been made. I didn't know if I'd even get a response back. But in my heart, I knew that message I wrote wasn't just for him. It was a proclamation to the universe. You see, even if Daniel had completely ignored my message, just by the act of sticking to my guns, albeit with love and kindness, I was sending a clear message to the universe of what I know I deserve and what I want to attract. Lo and behold, a few days later, he did respond. His message was full of honesty about what had really been triggering him, as well as softness. There were no assumptions in sight. We were back on a healthy page and communication felt more open than before. Was this what successful conflict resolution and adult communication looked like? While I am half joking, as someone who can have an anxious avoidant attachment style, I am no stranger to avoiding heavy convos in favor of keeping the peace. So, speaking my truth and finding a bond to be stronger afterward truly did feel novel and refreshing to me. For those wondering, we didn't talk specifics about becoming official or set any real plans in motion. At the end of the day, your girl doesn't live in Mexico and is about to be in Europe all summer. But we did level set and reaffirm that our time together was truly special. And who knows, maybe there can be something in the future if there is alignment. But we're not holding each other to it. So, what's the moral of the story here? Well, don't make assumptions and be clear about what you're after. And no, not the night before you leave or after you've already gone. You're going to want to set those expectations right away, baby. Ensure that you're on the same page, whether or not that be casual or if you're looking for something more serious. And I just want to say, if you are looking for something more serious, that is totally okay. I'm a romantic too. And while travel does lend itself to more casual hookups or dating, you don't get what you don't ask for. Be upfront about the quality or level of interactions you're seeking, even if it is just for a short time or something more extended. Trust me, it will save you a lot of heartbreak, even if it does make your dating pool smaller. And for folks looking for something more casual and light, you are not excused from honest communication either. Be clear about where you're coming from before diving in, because there may be a chance the other person is playing for keeps. And most importantly, be gentle with yourself and do your best to take nothing personally. We're all just trying our best to make sense of dating, sex, life. We're gonna make mistakes. People are gonna trigger us. It happens. Continue to move with love in your heart and practice speaking your truth and intentions earlier and earlier. I'll be right there with you, learning, unlearning, all that jazz. So keep up the good fight. And until next time, I'm Cassy Martinez.